Are you aging right now? Quite likely. So good that you have me to share some more of the infos, tips, ideas, and research from the last day of the 19th Aesthetic and Anti-Aging Medicine World Congress in Monaco. So, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about telomeres. I'm going to talk about some new angles in anti-aging medicine that you might not have been as aware of, or that have some new ideas in them. And of course, what can you do right now to stay healthy and to prevent terrible aging, to slow aging, maybe even eventually reverse aging? At least stay as well as you can until that day actually happens. So, number one, telomeres. Very quickly, what are telomeres? You are probably aware of it at this stage, but let me very briefly remind you. So, telomeres are those caps at the end of your chromosomes, and they basically protect your chromosomes, they protect your DNA when your cells are dividing. And your cells can divide about 50 to maybe 70 times. And each time, though, they do that, the cells divide, your telomeres are getting shorter. That means that the fuse to the good replication with as much as possible of your DNA intact is getting shorter and shorter, which at some stage means like your cells, once the telomeres are gone, your cell won't be operating as it should anymore. It can die or it can create other havoc in your body. So, one fact that I found interesting in one of the presentations was that at conception, you actually have about 15,000 what they call base pairs. So that's relatively long. But as you age, and I come back to that in a moment, your telomere length gets shorter and shorter, so less base pairs. At birth, for instance, remember, conception 15,000, at birth you have 10,000 base pairs. So if you think about it, and if you take the approach of telomere shortening, then you would have to say that you actually start aging right after conception. Sounds a bit weird, but if you take that approach, that would be the case. A lot of other researchers say you're actually starting to age at birth. So that should be maybe an eye-opener for you, because if you just take a look at telomeres, they are getting shorter and shorter throughout your lifetime. And this is not just talking about the individual cells themselves, because of course they replicate, etc. But overall, they tend to get shorter in general. So when you are in childhood, when you have reached teenage age, you have about 10,000 base pairs. When you reach 60, you can expect to have about 5 to 6,000. And overall, it's about 30 to 60 base pairs that you lose per year, depending very much on your lifestyle, your environment, etc. There is an accelerated shortening, so you lose more base pairs per year basically if you have a lot of inflammation. And you know a lot of about inflammation, I'm sure, because that's something we keep talking about. I keep talking about. And also about oxidative stress. So when you have a lot of oxidative stress in your system, then telomeres will be shortening quicker. And your aim really is to slow the shortening of your telomeres so that they stay longer for longer. And then ideally, you want to actually lengthen those telomeres again. And that's actually possible with a process that's called telomerase. But as I said, in the first place, you want to actually avoid as much as possible accelerated shortening or shortening altogether. So things you can do here include, for instance, stop smoking, Try to avoid as much as possible processed foods, sugars, etc. Also, if you have a larger waist hip ratio, then that can also shorten your telomeres quicker. You don't want to have a too low ratio as well. I have not seen, well, it wasn't mentioned during the conference studies about too small of a waist hip ratio, but I know from other studies that that actually ages you quicker as well. So you want to have an ideal one. If I remember right from another study, it is about 0.8. So like about 80%, you have 80% in your waist of your hip waist. So that seems to be pretty ideal. So between 80% to 100%, though ideally not higher. If you have a high systolic blood pressure, that can also shorten your telomeres quicker. If you take drugs like statins, same thing. And also, if you're actually in your body low in human growth hormone, in studies they have shown, as had been mentioned at the conference, to also shorten your telomeres. So that might be something you might want to get checked out. So what can you do to actually extend, to lengthen your telomeres? Some of the research says, okay, eat more plant-based food because that can actually lengthen your telomeres. Eat more than 30 grams of fiber every day, depending on how well you can tolerate that, of course. Omega-3, vitamin D, vitamin E, they have all been related to telomere lengthening. The same as moderate exercise, stress management. I've already been talking about that previously, but do meditation, do a little bit of yoga, do breathing exercises. They can all lengthen your telomeres and with that keep you in a much healthier state for much longer. And another way that had been mentioned during the conference was you, especially when you're getting into menopause, actually doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I know there's so many women who and actually a gynecologist who go back to that nightmare study that had been done that claimed that women get more cancer as they do hormone replacement therapy. But they weren't bioidentical. And there were so many problems with that study. So do yourself something good. It's not just related to telomere lengthening. Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy has plenty of advantages if done right. So you do need to find somebody who actually understands it well so that you get the most benefits out of it. So that is for telomeres. Let's talk about new angles in anti-aging medicine. And the one that I personally found the most inspiring, the most exciting, the most curious thing is voice. But it actually makes a lot of sense because just think about if you don't see a person, if you call somewhere, or you have your eyes closed, you're sitting somewhere on the train or whatever, you have your eyes closed and you hear people around you. You do estimate the age by the voice. It tends to be that older people have a different voice than younger people. It often sounds much less powerful. And of course, the power source, as had been mentioned in the presentation today, for a good voice is your chest and also your abdominal muscles. It is kind of where you take the air from. So again, the breathing that I've just been mentioning is so important. Breathing well is one of the things that can help you to also have a better voice, keep a better voice for longer, and also keep your whole body longer. So when we look at voice, the changes, there are quite a few changes actually that relate to the voice. But some of the reasons why our voice changes is the elasticity of our lung tissue goes down. So, it's getting more flabby, not only outside, but inside as well. The anatomy is changing. The angles are changing. The air volume that we can actually produce is changing. So all those relate to an older voice. And I find that quite fascinating, not only from the perspective of, okay, we can recognize somebody. But if you think about the psychological aspect of it, a lot of people, when they age and have a weaker voice, they often also feel weaker. They don't feel as powerful, as confident anymore. And then there are two things. It's like when somebody else sees you and you are in that state, they think the same, it's like, hey, yeah, no, she's not that confident. She is weak. But even if you wouldn't do that just with a voice, even if you wouldn't feel like that yourself, but even just with a voice, that perception can be there. So it is important to keep your voice strong. And one thing, like one of the major things the presenter actually shared was avoid reflux. It's very damaging to your voice. And so that's number one. Otherwise, all of those typical lifestyle approaches that I'm talking about again and again, good nutrition, exercising, relaxing, again, breathing exercises, and another very, very good tool in order to keep your voice strong and healthy is singing. So now I'm not the best singer at all, but maybe I am actually thinking about, maybe I should start singing lessons, because my voice already doesn't carry too well. So, and it's not how I feel on the inside. So I do want to be able to bring my voice across much better. And I believe it will probably also be reflected in the actual posture. So super, super interesting, the topic of voice and aging. Another one that's really interesting is the idea about the gut, brain, skin axis. So you have heard for sure about the gut-brain axis. There are plenty of different axes that are talked about when we look at aging. But gut, brain, skin is quite logical, but I think it's actually really important that we look much closer at it. So in a way, you can say you feel and look like what you eat. So basically, the food you eat obviously goes into your gut. From there, it extracts nutrients that your body can use, your brain can use in order to be healthy, which then again goes to the skin. But there's also actually the additional path then. If your skin is not healthy, that can actually have a negative impact on your brain, especially when you think about like your own self-perception about neurotransmitters, etc., just the way you feel. So, and also the other way around. So if your neurotransmitters are low because you're not getting the right food, or your body just can't absorb the food properly, then that will have an impact on your skin. Because like if you're stressed, for instance, many women and men actually see that in their skin. So gut, brain, skin axis, something to keep in mind. And the last new perspective that I want to mention to you is stress and reward. So what the presenter of that presentation said was your stress response. So how you react to stress is actually set during your fetal life, or like basically when you were in the womb of your mother, during birth, and in the first years of your life. So unfortunately, we cannot go back to change whatever our mothers have done. But there are a few things that we can change. But as you know, cortisol is related to stress. And cortisol is in itself regulated, or one of the things it's regulated by or stimulated by, is your circadian rhythm, and it changes throughout the day, your cortisol levels, and it tends to be the lowest just after waking up. And one particular stimulant of cortisol in order to rise is light. So it's one of the basically it's a really important Zeitgeber in order to reset your circadian rhythm. The thing there is, like if your cortisol increases, etc., you often feel more hungry. Guess where all the binge eating is coming from? And we know binge eating is not particularly good for healthy aging. So is there maybe some other way to actually influence that, apart from trying to use willpower not to do that? Yes, there is, thankfully. And it seems to be a relatively recent discovery. I had heard about orexins. So basically, there is a better way to deal with that situation. So in order to, and deal with that stress, so if you actually provide meaningful support to somebody, something that has meaning to you, where you feel, wow, I have done something good, that is a reward that you receive by doing something. Binge eating feels like a reward to your body, to your mind. But if you're actually doing something good, you don't have to binge eat anymore. And you can actually break that stress cycle. And, well, not only that you're doing something good for yourself, you're also doing something good for others, which is amazing. So let's bring it together. What can you do in order to slow aging, live healthier now, slow aging, and keep your body, mind, and spirit in the best shape, form, condition as possible? I do not want to go much more into specific lifestyle tips, because I've been talking a lot about different lifestyle tips already now today, but also over the previous days. I always talk about that in my newsletters that I send out every Friday, and on social media as well. But if you do actually, in the newsletters, you get the best information, so the most recent information. So I do suggest that you actually get my newsletter, sign up, go to the janessima.com website and sign up for the newsletter. You won't regret it. But let's come back what you can do. So there is no point in trying to slow or reverse aging if you're not doing the basics. It just won't work. It's pointless. So prevention really comes first. And do remember, I was saying that you start aging depending on the approach and the research that is taken by a researcher. You can start aging right after conception or right after birth. So the earlier you actually start doing something for your body, the better it is. So don't wait, even if you might not feel any signs now. This is a gradual process that actually degrades and deteriorates your body over time. When you're buying a car, and I come back to that example, even though I'm not a big fan of using a car as a comparison to our body. But you would never think about buying a car, and only when it really starts falling apart to do something about it. So why so many people never think about looking after their body properly? You need to start early, so as soon as possible. But also, it is really, really important to take responsibility. Nobody else is responsible for your body. No doctor, nobody else in the world is responsible. Only you. Because when you take the standard so-called healthcare system that I call sick care system, because it only looks and kind of cares about you when you have symptoms, which means you have had many years of many decades of deterioration before that happened. So when they only look at that, it's like your car falling apart. Sometimes, like in a car, you could change the car, or you can change complete organs, or in that case, pieces. We're not at that stage yet. So do look after your body. Do take responsibility and invest in yourself. It is so important. Invest, the earlier you invest, the smaller the amount you need to at the end, like over time, because you just won't need as much. Plus, you will feel so much better. And if you're actually working, like when you're a businesswoman, when you have your own business, whatever it may be, you are so much more productive. You will get so much more done, and you will feel much better doing it all. So please look after yourselves as early as possible. And then the second thing that I do want to recommend as well, or third in a way, is that do measure. And unfortunately, while we already have a lot of biomarkers, and there's a lot of talk about different biomarkers of aging, I do not think we have really found the best for truly assessing the progress of aging in a really truly meaningful way. At a minimum, do measure, and that's something that every doctor can prescribe, because that is actually kind of standard. If you ask them for it, should be complete standard that you do that a few times a year. But again, that's it. We're living in a sick care system, not in a preventative or even functional health system. So at least, look at things like variables, because anything you measure, you can actually look at, you can compare, you can actually see, okay, what are the things happening? So like if you have, for instance, an Aura ring, and you see, or a Fitbit, or a Garmin, or iWatch, whatever they're all called, or Apple Watch, whatever it's called. Basically, if you actually look at it and you see, like this night I didn't sleep well, but you know that the night before you ate a lot very late, then you can create those relationships. So that's, in a way, that's the first start. That is one that's very easy, that you can do at any time. And there are pretty cheap variables available at this time. So, but then the next one is really from the biological side. At least get your inflammation measured. It's cheap. I mean, I sometimes go to the lab and I just pay for it, because it really doesn't cost an awful lot to get your inflammation measured. CRP is a super simple measure. I have found one home test, but it only really helps you if you have already a higher level of inflammation. So actually that's a level that is very damaging in order to measure that. So the best is try to get your inflammation down and measure it regularly in a lab. Get a prescription if you can. Look at your blood sugar, and again, that's something you can do at home. I prefer continuous blood glucose monitors, because again, it gives you a picture over a certain period of time. And even if you do it, let's just for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and test things, probably 4 weeks might be a good thing, because you can take 2 weeks to just create a basis to see, okay, if I continue living my normal lifestyle, this is what's happening. This is what spikes my blood sugar. This is what's happening when I do exercise. This is what's happening when I take a cold shower, etc., etc., etc. So it gives you an idea. And then you could use the next 2 weeks, just as an example, to test certain things. So for instance, you might say, hey, there are different carbohydrates that you like, for instance, but you want to see what works. It's like one thing that often comes up is potatoes. And you could, for instance, and I did that test last Christmas actually, like potatoes in general, like they have a lot of carbohydrates, and for a lot of people it spikes the blood sugar. But if you let them cool down and basically let it turn into starches, and then maybe eat it as I did, as a potato salad with mayonnaise and other yogurt and other things in there, super delicious. Didn't spike at all. I was actually really surprised. But we are all different. And what spikes the blood sugar for one does not do it for the other. So it is very individual. Again, it goes back to you taking responsibility and looking what is happening for you, what works and what doesn't for you, because it's individual. There are no true general guidelines. Yes, there are some ideas, but you need to test them for yourself. You need to run your own experiments. And this is kind of what we do, like when I coach women, or also in the club that we have. It's something that we do, that we work, and that we try. We run rejuvenation experiments. And then at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, here, that worked for you. Oh, that didn't work. What can we do in order to change that? And then over time, you learn to live a much healthier lifestyle. So, as I said, inflammation, blood sugar, cholesterol, you do want to know what your cholesterol is. Vitamin D, also super important. And there are a few other markers, but I think kind of like these are really markers that are super helpful for you. And then if you think about biological age, glycan age, well, I'm a big fan of glycan age. So for me, this is one of the most meaningful biological age tests at the moment. It's highly related to the immune system, to the strength of your immune system. So for me, it is a very good measure. And it's one that does not fluctuate every kind of, you take vitamin D and suddenly it's completely different. So it is more meaningful. And I also personally like NAD because that is related to the energy in your body, to your mitochondria, which are super important. And I think it's also worth to get your genome checked out because, and you need to, theoretically anyway, only do that one time. Then you have an idea of if you have higher risk in certain areas. Like if you have ApoE4, then there are a lot of diseases, aging related diseases that are connected to that. But just having that higher risk does not mean that you get it. So that's why for me, I like DNA test, because if I see, okay, I have a higher risk in an area, it's a lifestyle that's, for most of it, it's a lifestyle that switches on and off a gene. So if you know that you have a gene that predisposes you, that gives you a higher risk for a certain disease, then you can adapt your lifestyle accordingly to change that. So that's why I would recommend that. And in general, there are other things that you might want to focus on. Is there measure what is important for you. Measure the things that make a difference. Measure things that actually help you to take specific action. So that is it. That's a wrap for me for the 19th Aesthetic and Anti-Aging Medicine World Congress 2021 in Monaco. And I will see you at the next conference. All the best, stay healthy and young. Bye.